Last night, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that he was suspending all trade talks with Canada. He said he was doing this in reaction to an ad campaign that Premier Doug Ford from Ontario was running in the United States. An excerpt from a speech by the late President Ronald Reagan about tariffs. Here's an excerpt from that speech, from that ad.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Now, Reagan really did say those things. He believed in free trade and lower tariffs. We know that because he negotiated an enormous free trade deal with Canada, and he deregulated the U.S. economy. But Reagan said other things, too, in the same speech, too, about how tariffs can and should be used for temporary purposes if foreign trade is skewed in certain ways. Obviously, those parts were left out of the speech. Now, news reports say the government of Ontario has spent $75 million on that ad. Now, I honestly find that hard to believe. That is so massive. I mean, for comparison, the National Firearms Association, the National Rifle Association, only spent $10 million in the last election cycle. Is this ad really multiple times more costly? Elon Musk, a staggering expenditure of $100 million in the last election. Did Ontario really spend $75 million? Now, some people are cheering at Trump's reaction. They say it proves how effective the ad was. Well, yeah, I mean, it did get a reaction, if that's what you mean by effective, but I'm not sure that's the same as effective in terms of getting what Canada needs. I mean, Bob Rae, Canada's top diplomat at the UN, was gleefully retweeting American political enemies of Trump who were cheering for the ad. Now, I'm not a master diplomat myself, but it seems to me that if you're trying to persuade Trump to change course and be more solicitous towards Canada, joining his partisan enemies in a good laugh at Trump might not be something you want your top diplomat in New York doing on Twitter, but I don't know, what do I know? But what should Canada do now? Should the ads keep running? Is that a good idea? Does anyone think it is? Does anyone think that Donald Trump is just moments away from collapsing and giving Canada everything we need? Seriously. Other than some partisan cheering, does anyone think this ad actually worked? Does anyone understand why Doug Ford, a provincial premier, is mucking around in foreign affairs? Does anyone think he's better at that than our entire Foreign Affairs Department in Ottawa or the hundreds who work in the Canadian Embassy in Washington, D.C.? I mean, here's a few of Doug Ford's classic diplomatic moments these past months.
The dollars of contracts that we have with the U.S. We are the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world. We buy over 3,600 products from 35 states. I talked to the governor of Kentucky and Mitch McConnell. Don't touch our bourbon. I'm going after absolutely everything. And I don't want to. We keep the lights on to 1.5 million homes in manufacturing in New York, in Michigan, and in Minnesota. If he wants to destroy our economy and our families, I will shut down the electricity going down to the U.S. And I'm telling you, we will do it. It's unfortunate. I would rather ship you more electricity, ship you more critical minerals. I want to ship you more energy, more potash to keep your farmers going, and uranium that you use for your nuclear power. It comes through from Saskatchewan over to Ontario. And it's going to be a massive, massive problem. I'm telling you, we love the Canadians love Americans. I love the U.S. Everyone does. And not one American friend. When I lived there for 20 years, I've talked to all of them. Hardcore Republicans are saying this is the biggest mistake President Trump has done, and we're dead against it. And I've yet to find one who supports him.
If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything
including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face. So, and I'm encouraging every other province to do the same. Quebec, Manitoba, BC, we all have to act in unison. Out east, they rely on our energy. They need to feel the pain. They want to come at us hard, we're going to come back twice as hard. So I appreciate the question. Sorry, I'm getting a little passionate today about this, because that guy drives me crazy down south, I'll tell you, and 41 million other Canadians. So, we also need to learn more about where the government's retaliatory tariffs. I'm a strong believer in retaliatory tariffs. You can't let someone hit you over the head with a sledgehammer without hitting him back twice as hard, in my opinion.
Now, I've never met Trump myself, but I'm not sure if threatening to illegally cut off electricity contracts from Canada that go to millions of Americans in the Northeast, I'm not sure that's the kind of thing that wins over this particular U.S. president. There's no way that Doug Ford and Mark Carney, two best friends, as they constantly remind us, aren't operating as a tag team here. There's no way that Mark Carney didn't sign off on this. And the regime media loves it, but activity and insults are not a substitute for a strategy. Here's Mark Carney this week saying that our trade relationship with America is dead. What?
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
So it is dead, or you want it to be dead? Is he pronouncing it dead? Does he not know that sometimes negotiations have dramatic moments in it that are just posturing and puffery? Is it his preference that our trade relationship be dead? How does that square with his promises to work with Trump? I don't think Mark Carney has a clue. I think he's a classic case of overpromise, underdeliver, being promoted to the level of his incompetence. You ever heard that phrase before? That's why he keeps going on these junkets overseas. He hates being in question period or answering reporters, even his own government reporters. He hates Parliament and any other mechanisms designed for transparency and accountability. He prefers foreign meetings, the sort he mastered when he was a director of the World Economic Forum. No opposition, no accountability, no free press, no ethics registry, no lobbyist registry. Mark Carney's constant foreign trips are an attempt to recapture that world of luxury and no accountability. But Canada is in a crisis. How do you solve a problem like Trump? Carney made that the ballot question in the election. He claimed he was the Trump whisperer, but it never looked convincing to me. He bashed Trump and insulted Trump on the campaign trail, but then he was obsequious and submissive during their meetings. And so far, absolutely nothing has been achieved. By the way, Doug Ford has said he will suspend the ads, but only after this weekend's World Series game. Carney is now taken to boasting about the Canada-U.S. free trade deal that was negotiated years ago, claiming that status quo as some sort of personal achievement. But look, Carney has actually not achieved anything, and if you think about it, he's never actually been a business executive in the arena, solving problems. He was a chairman of Brookfield, which is a figurehead, a meeting chair, a spokesmodel. He was an analyst at Goldman Sachs, same thing. He was a critic, he was a voyeur, he was a consultant, but never a doer. Those jobs are very different from actually running a business and leading. Any random owner of a convenience store has more business experience than Mark Carney. Tell me one thing that Carney has accomplished in 225 days as Prime Minister. That's how long it's been. Now compare that to what Trump has done in 225 days, or a little bit less, a little bit more, sorry. Carney brought a fresh list of buzzwords to the PMO that Trudeau didn't use: transformational, catalyzing, decisive action, generational, AI. You know, he sounded really fresh for about 30 seconds until it became clear he just mixes and remixes that jargon in every statement, like Trudeau's word salads. There's nothing under the words. There's nothing in the suit. There's no there.
First thing we need is to recognize that we need to use scarce dollars to the maximum effect. This isn't just about bigger volumes, it's about using scarce public dollars to maximum effect. And that is catalyzing financial instruments using risk mitigation tools to better allocate risk between the public and private sector. I will just refer for speed to the agenda of the Private Sector Investment Lab and what the World Bank has been doing on risk management. The second point is crowding in institutional capital through originate to distribute models. There's a lot of words there. What it basically means is recycling the balance sheets of our international financial institutions. So they are there catalyzing the new lending. Once it matures, it's parked off to other holders that can hold it for the long term. And it's all about action, new action at the MDBs. The third point is strengthening the structures, processes, governance of the institutions. To put it into plain words, the shareholders should be looking at key performance indicators that are directly tied, of course, to the Sustainable Development Goals, but also absolute volumes of capital that are moving.
Right now is the biggest crisis in Mark Carney's short tenure. Doug Ford, with no constitutional authority, let alone the approval of Canadians, especially from outside his province, has become the de facto negotiator with Trump. And Ford's style is a combination of insults, like calling Trump a tyrant, and an unconvincing attempt to out-bully Trump.
My number one job is make sure we protect the people of Ontario. I need to protect the communities against that tyrant south of the border, which drives me absolutely nuts. And we'll always be there to protect the families and businesses who call our province home.
Ford is normally despised by the regime media in Ontario, but they love his anti-Trump outbursts, so they've made him Canada's face in the U.S. while Carney runs away. Imagine making a statement in French, which Carney did today, so the Americans can't understand it, and then running away without answering any questions. Carney is hiding and letting Doug Ford, his sole provincial ally, fill the gap. Look, the problem with the ad wasn't the ad. It was that Ford was trying to hustle Trump and hustle Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and he was spending that money campaigning during an election year. It's always election year down there. The Americans correctly have identified Ford as Carney's attack dog. Don't they know that Trump always engages in tit for tat? If you push him, he pushes back? Of course they know that. But as Foreign Minister Anita Anand announced the other day, they're all fine with this. After all, they seek to realign Canada towards China. Seriously, she just said that. She had a great meeting with the Chinese. Not so good with the Americans, but the Chinese love her. Now, I don't know how to negotiate with Trump to save Ontario's auto factories. I don't know. I don't know if it's possible. But I didn't promise millions of Canadians that I had a secret ability to connect with Trump like Carney did. Occam's razor suggests an explanation here. Maybe this is exactly what Carney wants. For a decade at the World Economic Forum, Mark Carney has been promoting decarbonization, and he's been promoting stakeholder capitalism, that is, socialism. He was the UN climate ambassador. He led an industry movement to debank oil companies. His wife, Diana Fox, is even more extreme than Carney is. Could it be that Carney is actually fine with all this? In fact, that he's glad he can blame an external bogeyman for it all. The deindustrialization of Ontario, the demarketing of the oil sands, the delinking of Canada to the U.S., moving towards a more China-centric world, defying Western alliances, putting the UN and Palestine ahead of traditional bilateral relationships with the U.S., Israel, and NATO countries. Oh, and by the way, don't forget that Mark Carney refused to sell any of his 600 different stocks. When he became Prime Minister, only 5% of his companies are Canadian. We don't know his net worth. No regime journalists have bothered to ask him. He's an oligarch. We just don't know if it's $100 million or $1 billion. But the strange fact is he refuses to sell his stocks, suggesting that running Canada is not his sole priority. Getting richer is. And look at those stocks. He is personally bearish on Canada. His last act at Brookfield was to shut down their Canadian head office and move it to New York City. Mark Carney will make money by Canada doing poorly. Show me an error in my thinking. This is a very difficult time right now. You can blame Doug Ford, and he deserves some of the blame. But this is all Mark Carney's plan. Stay with us for more on this.